So our reading for today is a very short one. It comes from the Gospel of Luke, and it's from Luke chapter 9, verses 46 through 48. An argument among the disciples concerning which one of them was the greatest. Oh, I left the word out. An argument arose among the disciples concerning which one of them was the greatest. But Jesus, aware of their inner thoughts, took a little child and put it by his side and said to them, "Whoever welcomes this child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. For the least among all of you is the greatest." This is the word of the Lord. So our text is pretty short and to the point today, and we're all familiar with these. I think these images of Jesus in Scripture as he would be bringing children forward. Right, that there was a special care in Jesus's heart for children. But when he does that, when this passage and the parallels to this come up in the Gospels, it's always in terms of how we should live in the world. You know, I was thinking about how when I was a child, how I think when most of us are children, we spend at least a goodly chunk of time, thinking about the ways that we can grow up quickly. Like when you're little, you want to be big, right? And sometimes that causes people to miss what's so wonderful about childhood, but that is part of it, that desire to be fully grown, to grow up. And then when we get older, when we reach adulthood, and I think I especially remember this as a young adult when I was in my 20s, that there were times when as I began to have to manage all that adult stuff, which is way more complicated than a lot of that kid stuff, I would look back and be like, oh boy, it would be nice to be a kid again, where someone else was taking care of all this hard stuff. So, we all of us, I think, have within us this idea of our inner child in a way, and that we need to care for, and that sometimes feels the need of care from other people too. But something that's actually pretty common, I think, to both children and adults is the way in which all of us we want to have ourselves be placed first. It's part of our fallenness, our human nature, our kind of innate selfishness that we always have to be fighting against, that we always need to sort of keep in check, right? Because when we become focused on just our needs and only what we're looking for and what we want and what we think we need, that we begin to act in ways that are selfish and uncharitable and unkind. And so a lot of us, I think, sometimes think of those things as kind of childish behavior when we see it in an adult, because, when we're very young, it's all about us. Our universe is just us, and our needs are the most important when we're very, very young. And when we see it in adults, them being focused on just their needs, we get, kind of look at them as being selfish and childish, not acting like adults. So in our text today, we kind of see that all of this reflected in that first line that came with that we have from Luke. And we'll just take a look at it again here. There it is. An argument arose among the disciples concerning which of them was the greatest. And what's so interesting about this is the way in which the writer talks about how Jesus interacted with this moment. Not about hearing their words, but aware of their inner thoughts, that he was aware of their inner thoughts. It is that notion that Jesus was pretty, I think, astute, knowing that, each of us has these built-in selfishness, that what we want is to be the person in charge, the one who is most important, the one who should be on top. And that's what the disciples were doing. They're like, who was the most important one among us? I think that we have this as just as an ongoing thing in our life. Sometimes we don't feel valued, and we have to consider why it is we feel that way. It can be an issue of not having enough self-esteem. It could be an issue of having faced trauma. It could be that we're in the midst of illness and it seems like nobody cares. There's all kinds of things that can have us feel not valued by others. And oftentimes our responses to this are to begin to maneuver and to position ourselves to try and gain a higher position, especially in terms of the people around us, that we try and get up by putting others down, that as we become focused on our own needs, we begin to sort of, do that kind of Scrabble, that scrum of pushing back and forth and climbing on top of. And that's often kind of our inner dialogue, how we can advance ourselves. Now, it is important to have that confidence and that ability and that drive to improve our lot in life. But Jesus is talking about in this little text about how we ought to be thinking about this, how we ought to be approaching this. It's not a matter of just denying yourself and allowing yourself to suffer and be trod upon, because that's certainly not what God is interested in for each one of us. God wants each one of us to reach our full potential. But the way we get there is so important because it will define how we feel about ourselves when we arrive. And it'll define how, well, not how, but I think who we have around us. And having that relational connection in the world to others that's healthy is important. And if we get to that place where we're okay and have done it by stepping on others, it's going to be kind of a lonely place. It's going to be the kind of place where, we're going to continually have to watch our back, because probably the people around us are people that would be willing to step on us too, to get themselves up, give themselves a leg up. It's important to think about how we treat others in this. And what Jesus talks about in the text this morning is really puts it in, I think, a sharp contrast or context for us. He puts it in terms of children. Who among us doesn't value little children, doesn't want to help them, doesn't want to lift them up, doesn't want to make sure that they're cared for? Who doesn't feel sad or the need to reach out when we see a child in distress or who is hungry or has some kind of need? It's only natural. We're hardwired that way. The question is, can we feel that way about everybody around us? And can we feel that way about ourselves and see ourselves in that? Jesus says very clearly, whoever welcomes this child, someone like this child, who welcomes the child in his name, who welcomes the child with the kind of compassion and lessons in life, the kind of approach that Jesus took, whoever does that is welcoming Christ in their own life and is welcoming God, that idea of that higher calling in our life, and to see that there's a bigger picture. And the reason that we do that, why we try and emulate Christ and welcome God into ourselves, is to realize, Jesus says, that it is the least among us that is the greatest. For the least among all of you is the greatest. The person that's most important is the one who has the most need. We have to really think about those ways that we can be serving one another. It doesn't mean ignoring ourselves. It doesn't mean ignoring how important it is for us to engage in that self-care. But it does mean that we need to be kind to people along the way. It does mean that we need to seek to be helping those who are most in need around us. And that in doing so, we're not just doing God's work, but we're actually doing ourselves that favor. I know that it's hard, especially when we feel like we're not valued. I know that it's hard when we are in struggle not to do everything in our power, even if it's not the nicest kinds of things, to get that value, self-value, and value from others that we need to get to the potential we feel we can reach. but we need to do it without doing damage to our souls, to our basic humanness, our basic sense of being complete in ourselves. We need not to forget that by living uncompassionately and unkindly as we strive to please our inner child, we're damaging other inner children along the way if we don't do it the right way. At the start of the service, there was a picture of this picture of a dog carrying another dog in a basket, to just get that idea of who needs a lift. Who is it that we need? Actually, I found it on this little meme that has a great quote from the Dalai Lama. Our prime purpose in this life is to help others. And if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. I think this is a really good maxim, a really good saying to think about. When we're helping others, we are indeed helping ourselves. As we lift people around us, it gives us greater value. It teaches us our self-value. As we work towards our own well-being and do it in a way that helps others along with us, we are building relationships that support us, that are mutually supportive as we come into difficult times, because difficult times will always be ahead of us now and then. We need to think about who we're going to lift up, who around us is struggling, who around us can we, even in the midst of our own struggles, at least be kind to, or at least choose not to be unkind to. It's so important. So I think that's a good thing for us to leave on here. This little text, I think, that sums it all up. Our prime purpose in this life is to help others. And if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. Good words to live by. Something I think that we all could use a little bit of in our life. All right. Until we meet next week, may God go with you, and may God bless you in all that you do. And may God lead you to be the kind of person who is looking for those around you that you can lift up.